You know what? I know exactly what you're looking for from this story tonight. It's one about the paranormal, isn't it? Well, you have come to the right place. I work for the Department of Paranormal Investigation. I simply couldn't resist this title, and I know you can't either. So, definitely going to deliver everything you want. Hope you're ready. Okay, well, it's a long one, an hour and a half or so I will put the timestamps into the video description so that you can, well, if you want to come back another night and finish this off. I know a lot of you can't always do all these in one evening, so it's going to be there for you when you come back. So, what else am I going to say? Buckle up for one hell of a ride, because here we go with File 184, John Henry, by Ringo Cross. Chapter 1, The Joker and the Fool. Greetings. I'm Special Agent Michelle Harris, and I work for a relatively unknown agency called the Department of Paranormal Investigation, or DPI for short. I explained the particulars regarding my agency in my investigative report, labeled File Number 177, The Story of Emma Summers. Also, a short summary of my background, education, and overall experience can be found there. This is another one of those reports I felt compelled to complete for various reasons. All too often, cases like this get buried in the archives and are forever lost to the hands of time and indifference. I hope to bring at least a modicum of peace and justice to their memory. Solace and clarity are the only two things that seem to ease the weight that burdens my conscience. In my earlier file, I delved into the inner workings of my department when it comes to handling cases. I fear my prior, more informal explanation may have failed to shed sufficient light. I feel it's important to illuminate the reasons why I do these reports outside of their obvious cathartic nature. So please, bear with me. The terminology may be a bit disorienting, but I'll do my utmost to keep my explanation terse. First, I'm assigned to the case by my immediate supervisor, who's called a field coordinator. Then my partner and I take some time to look over the files and determine a course of action. We're assigned to a case for one of three reasons. Number one, they're part of a project or experiment. Number two, a resource specialist flagged a civilian occurrence as a PEP. And lastly, the case was directly assigned to us by the abstruse Board of Trustees. Now, as a DPI agent, it's my primary duty to identify if the case under investigation is paranormal in nature. If it is, then it must be assigned a PLI, which is short for Proper Level of Inquest. Now, there are two major codes, VPE and EOE. PLI is accomplished by either completing a final report and attaching a file number if it is a VPE, or an all-important dossier number if it's an EOE. And these reports are completed by us if they're the latter, and a source agent if they're the former. If a case is considered a high enough threat to national security, it's forwarded over to the Board of Trustees for further examination. The trustees will take a vote, and if it passes, the files are handed over directly to the White House. This is when our observational report is possibly turned into a military operation by OSS. The EOE tag is needed for any report to be taken seriously by the higher-ups. It's so crucial that getting it wrong could lead to a permanent strike on an agent's disciplinary record. If a case is indeed considered EOE, it's our job to understand the phenomenon behind the occurrence or disturbance. I don't want to overload my report with DPI jargon, so I'll end here. Well, the case in question, CR file number 184. Please bear with me for another moment. I know I just promised not to cram my examination full of technical bits, but I need to explain why I do these reports specifically. VPE cases like number 184 are not considered a priority. They are unofficial reports in essence, meaning they're paranormal in nature but not EOEs. Cases of this lesser magnitude are the most common according to the SOP. Well, usually we hand over our initial reports, called a CIR or Criminal Investigative Report, to a source agent, and they convert our CIR into a criminal report file, or CRF for short. These final reports are given a 3-digit file number and stored under the non-essential category in our complete archival report folder, or CAR for short. I must emphasize how rare it is for a special agent to complete their own final reports. And for this reason, I'm secretly ridiculed by my superiors for being far too endearing. It doesn't bother me. I made a promise to myself that I would never forget the human aspect of every case, no matter how dark. In many ways, it's the only thing that brings me back whenever I feel astray. I've seen a lot in my short tenure at the department. Most of the things can be easily explained, rationalized, or compartmentalized away. But there are a few cases that have been difficult for me to slip neatly into a folder and lock away inside of my mental file cabinet. What's odd is that it's always the non-essential cases I lose the most sleep over. It's not like these cases stand out for their brutality or injustice, especially compared to their EOE counterparts. You'd think with a bachelor's in psychology, I could unpack my own emotions. Or perhaps one day I'll sit down on my own proverbial couch and spend the evening psychoanalyzing myself instead of all these supernatural beings. Though I doubt this wonderful idea will ever come to fruition. Considering I barely have enough time to do anything meaningful outside of work, well, as you can imagine, a job like this demands the bulk of my attention. Now to the case in question. CR File 184. It all began with a man named John Lucas Henry. He'd been suspected of killing his entire family in a fit of paranoid psychosis. Initial intel didn't give us much to go on. He didn't deny slaughtering his family. His reason was that the voice inside his head made him do it. Oh, if I had a nickel for every time I'd heard that line, I'd have a jar full of them by now. Okay, maybe not a jar, but you get the idea. Forgive my unabashed skepticism, but in my professional opinion, the voices in my head made me do it. It was the typical excuse suspects used when trying to avoid criminal responsibility. It is true that I work for an agency that investigates paranormal occurrences. Believe me, the irony is not missed, nor the hint of injustice provided by my incredulity. And the fact remains, no one in our department takes this criminal justification seriously. It always falls flat when scrutinized by an agent worth his or her badge. Though the excuse may be banal and a bit cheeky, the psychology is fascinating. I suppose this would make sense coming from someone who is obsessed with the human mind and what makes us tick. Now, for as long as I can remember, well before I chose to pursue a degree in psychology, and right after the situation with my sister, I often found myself pondering the merits of dualism and immaterialism. My thesis explored the true meaning of consciousness, as well as why so many of us view the brain and soul as separate experiences connected by one source, the body. The last section of my conclusion paragraph went like this. I'm convinced that I possess a soul. When I die, I'll be judged for my sins, unlike machine intelligence. Thus, I can say with supreme confidence that no matter how futuristic or evolved artificial intelligence becomes, it will never possess a soul. The machine is cold and objective. The human experience is warm and subjective. Take away our subjectivity and we lose our humanity. Make no mistake about it, AI is intelligent, and it would be foolish to argue otherwise. Intelligence is a part of their designate, but AI is not sapient. This rare distinction belongs to the only surviving member of the human species, Homo sapiens. As you can imagine, the conclusion to my thesis was considered controversial in some psychological circles, while simultaneously being lauded in certain theological circles. The notoriety is probably what put me on DPI's radar when I think back, but who knows? The reason my thesis caused a stir was because of the astonishing hypothesis, which was a book written by Dr. Frances Crick. In the book, she argued many things, too many to explain in my report. Well, the crude gist of her work states that we are, in fact, nothing but a bunch of neurons, and it's these very same neurons that create what we assume to be consciousness and subjective experience. This is, of course, a gross paraphrasing of her work. Even still, much of what she says in her book has been backed up by cognitive psychology and neuroscience. I'm not writing this report to sway anyone's ethics or further the debate between dualism and monism. I'm merely divulging what motivated me to pursue my studies. In truth, I've always had a passion for understanding the inner workings of the mind. Speaking of which, the case in question, File 184, is an interesting one. What I thought to be a textbook example of severe dissociative identity disorder turned out to be something far more sinister. Our story begins at the Detroit Metro Airport on July 16th, 2019. When we arrived, we were immediately hit with our first obstacle. Somehow there had been a mix-up with our seats. Instead of being assigned to business class, we'd been assigned to economy. I found this a bit irritating, but things happen. My partner, the always irritable Agent Adams, wasn't having it. Seeing his reaction, I tried to calm him, even going so far as to offer him the window seat. He scoffed at my proposition, turned to the clerk, and informed her that we were government agents on duty. Well, the clerk shrugged, apologized profusely, and told my partner there was nothing she could do. She said it in as polite a tone as possible, which only irritated my partner even more. He hated it when people were being overly nice to him. Me trying to play mediator, I asked if she could book us first-class seats for the following flight that just so happened to be in a few hours. And the compromise was enough to get him off her back. He turned his fury on HQ, first dialing up our supervisor and laying into him pretty thick. And this surprised me. For some reason, I thought he was calling to inform him that we were going to be late due to a mix-up with our flight. Then after abruptly ending that call, he went after his next target. He dialed up the resource department and cursed their supervisor for assigning us to a case in rural Georgia in the middle of summer. I remember sighing and telling myself to get mentally prepared for a long trip. Now that I think back on it, I remember how baffled I was by his odd conduct during our first few cases together. I was the agency's first female graduate from the DPI Field Investigations Unit. As you can imagine, I'd studied incredibly hard to earn my badge. I graduated with high marks and did everything by the book. It's funny now, but at the time, working with Gary had been something of a cultural shock. I'd been assigned to work with him by the board for reasons that are still unknown. Their decision caused something of a stir and is considered unprecedented. The story behind our first encounter is interesting to say the least. Well, I'll elaborate one day, but for now it's safe to say I was put into a situation that nearly killed me. Those are some fond memories. I'll admit I've learned quite a bit about the supernatural. A lot more than I would have if I was working with anyone else. One of the most important lessons he's inadvertently taught me was to always judge a book by its cover. Strange, I know, it's nothing he's ever come out and said in one of his many, less than witty comments. It's just something I've noticed, that's all. I say this because, out of the 5 years we've worked together, I can count on one hand how many times I've seen him phased under pressure. Our destination was the city of Butler. I have no clue why places like this were called city. It was located in one of the more rural areas of Georgia and was the county seat for Taylor County. I already knew it was going to be a long drive. My partner was still cranky from the flight and told me that since I was the junior agent, it was my duty to chauffeur him around. Knowing the operations manual like the back of my hand, I insisted that his claim wasn't true. When I said this, he shrugged and said he was still groggy from the sleeping pill he'd taken during the flight. Before I could argue, he hopped into the back seat, slipped on his sleeping mask and stretched out with a travel pillow he always brought with him. In truth, I didn't really mind. He'd been a total baby thus far. I could use the peace and quiet to think. Before he drifted off to sleep, I remember him commenting how, if he somehow made it to heaven, he'd get booted out for complaining that it was too sunny. He found my joke clever and replied with, "Start driving already, and turn the AC on so I can get out of this hellish heat. Sending me out of the sticks in the dead of summer to chase ghosts. Wait until I get back to HQ. I'm going to file a giant grievance." I agreed with his assessment of the case and said as much. I'm surprised the resource department flagged it. I'm sure this will be a textbook non-paranormal. Hey, remember, Michelle, don't try to solve the case. We're not detectives. You'll burn yourself out trying to be a hero. I don't know how many times I have to say it. Our job is to give people enough rope to hang themselves. If you do that, the case will solve itself. I thought about what he said during the drive. It didn't make sense, but then again, the things he said hardly ever made sense. After dismissing his comment as the ramblings of a miserable man, I listened to a self-help podcast for about 30 minutes. After that, I sank my teeth into a lengthy audio recording I'd made the other night, detailing everything we knew about the case. For the most part, I did a lot of thinking. Thought about my career and if I should put it on hold to pursue my postgraduate. Well, I doubted it, but then again, you never know. I know one thing for sure. My job had been taking a toll on me. It's like they were waiting for me to finish my training. I was assigned to work with Agent Adams straight away and have been going non-stop ever since. Another part of it was the work itself. The things I've learned have stretched my moral fibers beyond imagination. It's shocking to know who really runs the world, how they operate, and that there isn't much we can do to stop them, other than create an observation department, as the vampires love to call us. I grew up in a very religious home. I've always known God was real, even before my career. My faith was the only reason I went into psychology instead of psychiatry. Another thing that bothered me was verifying the existence of God. Oh, and I don't just mean any old God. I mean God in the biblical Christian context. That's right, he exists in all of his glory and grandeur, just as described. And yet, he hardly intervenes. I can't tell you how much this bothers me. Oh, the reason he leaves us to our own devices is because of what the angels call his almighty holy decree on free will. The whole free will versus divine will controversy or dispute, depending on which scholar or entity you ask, is crucial to the angelic schism and eventually led to the Great Heavenly Rebellion. I suppose you could say it was the first doctrinal dispute. Amazingly, the issue of free will is still a hot topic within the Holy Order. The rebellion did little to change that. When I first learned this, I was so surprised it took me a few weeks to really digest the implications. I always believed that the biblical story pertaining to God and Satan was a neat little story about good and evil. But it's a bit trickier than that. The Holy Order. I've mentioned the name a few times. Where do I even begin? I suppose with their mission. No, it's too complicated. I'll put it this way. They're the angelic governing and organizational body for all the angels stationed on Earth. And there's a lot more to it, but this is the short answer. During the drive, I also thought about my family. Based on divine doctrine, I believe my sister's soul is one of the many unfortunate ones trapped in a place she was never meant to be. The idea of hell had become personal. A little piece of suffering I could call my own. God could be downright cruel sometimes. But the rules are the rules, I suppose. And knowing this made me feel hopeless and sick to my stomach. The pain I'd buried when we buried my sister was beginning to resurface. Just then, my phone rang. Speaking of family and inescapable sorrow, it was my father. With that in mind, I took a deep breath before finally deciding to answer. Hi, Dad. Hello, Ladybug. I'm not 12. Yeah, I know. Yeah, everything okay? You'd know if you answered my calls. I'm sorry, I've been busy with work. That's no excuse for not talking to your father for a whole year. I know, I'm sorry. It's okay. That's not why I called. Well, you're not in trouble, are you? I am, but there's nothing you can do. Does this have anything to do with your drinking? Yeah, that's what they say. You know, doctors always trying to play God. Took me a second to gather my thoughts. The thought of him, it was too grim a thought. As soon as this case is over, I'll come visit you. You act like I'm dying. Your mother's the one you should be worried about. Dad, please, not this. When was the last time you talked to her? Dad, come on. How long is she going to walk around in that imaginary world of hers, pretending Ash is still alive? You know what? I didn't want to leave her. You know that, right? I know. Believe me, I know. Oh, you're the psychologist. You tell me what's wrong with the bugger. Dad, please, I'm not a psychologist. Even if I were, now's not the... Then when is? Why, it's okay for everyone to drag my name through the mud for leaving the crazy hag, but it's okay for her to drive our family apart. Ash was just as much my daughter as she was your mother's. You were 17. You were there when it happened. You saw how she blamed me. Hell, she still blames me. You wouldn't know because you got out of there and did right by yourself with college and now this cushy government gig. Dad, I understand. I know how... No, you don't know how I feel, so don't bother with it. I'll tell you all right. Imagine living with someone who won't let go of that kind of pain. I loved Ash just as much, damn it. I'm sorry for leaving your mother, okay? I just couldn't keep living like that, being reminded of your sister day and night, thanks to her batty ways. She still makes her bed, you know. Washes the same tired old-school uniforms. Talks as if Ash is due home any morning now. Now you tell me, who wants to live like that, huh? No wonder I turned to the bloody bottle. He stopped ranting and began sobbing like mad when the pain had finally breached his defenses. It was a guttural cry that was very difficult to listen to. I could feel my own eyes well up, but I had to stay strong. I had to for him and for my own sanity. Oh, bloody hell. Sorry, Ladybug. I just wish everything could go back to normal. Me too, Dad. Yeah, you two were close, eh? Yeah, very. That's good. Hey, where are you? I'm at the pub. Dad, you really need to stop drinking. Oh, Mother Mary, he muttered under his breath. I could hear the empty shot glass rattle when he slammed it down on the table and demanded another round. He made a scene about it, using our call as an excuse. He drunkenly proclaimed to the whole bar that he'd found his long-lost daughter before shamefully downing another shot. Dad, you really need to knock it off. So, what do you think, Doc? About what? My screwy is your mother. I reckon you think I've just as many nuts and bolts rattling around as that old tinker, he said before cackling. I have to go. Sorry for my behavior. I understand. You keep making us proud here. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Ladybug. I ended the call and sighed. I remember looking back to make sure Adams was still asleep. I don't know why that was the first thing I did, I thought as I fought back the tears. Well, I suppose it's what I deserve. I've been avoiding my parents for a while now. For the longest, I viewed their behavior as a distraction. I made a mental note to visit him and, maybe even Mother. After that, I pretty much blocked out the whole conversation and bravely carried on giving this investigation my full attention. Chapter 2. Southern Hospitality. We arrived at the Taylor County Jail at approximately 0800 hours on the following day, July 17th, 2019. It was a brand new jailhouse that was located right across from the old one. The only reason I knew this was because I foolishly went there first, only to be met by a bunch of rusted yard equipment, inside of what was now a makeshift storehouse. Across the way was a set of railroad tracks that stretched endlessly in both directions. The good old city of Butler. There wasn't much to say about it other than it was just like any other small town, quiet and quaint. The townsfolk were extremely nice, but a little too nosy. I wanted to see the courthouse, but my partner frowned upon the idea. And so we entered the jailhouse and made our way over to the club. I informed him who we were, and that the sheriff was expecting us. He promptly called for him over the two-way. There was a fair bit of radio chatter between them. He apologized for the confusion and asked that we sit tight. Apparently the atmosphere around town had been tense, but he promised that the sheriff was on his way. Agent Adams scoffed at the comment before grumbling that he was going outside to vape. Before leaving, he made a snide remark about how annoying it was having to wait. He sneered when I informed him that perhaps this was karma, giving him a taste of his own medicine. I remained inside and exchanged a fair bit of small talk with the young clerk. I learned a bit more about him and the case. From what I gathered, he loved his softball league, hated the fact that he came third in the annual chili cook-off, and thought all the fuss over Mr. Henry's case was unwarranted. I agreed with his last sentiment and told him that the sheriff probably pulled a few strings to get the case handed over to the FBI. I didn't tell him this, of course, but we receive a significant amount of our cases from the FBI and CIA, especially the latter, so much so we call them legacy cases, because they're partly to blame for my agency's existence in the first place. Being that this was a rural area, Mr. Henry's behavior and alleged crimes had stirred up a hornet's nest. These were good, honest townsfolk who believed that God and hard work were the cure for everything. Nobody could wrap their head around the fact that it was one of their own and not some sleazy ne'er-do-well from the big city who'd committed the ultimate act of evil. My opinion of the case was that this was just a classic example of the devil made me do it. Technically speaking, the devil cannot make anyone do anything. There are a few technicalities, but suffice to say, we rarely investigate the devil made me do it crimes because of this. At the department, we call these archetypal cases crying wolf. The sheriff arrived before we could sink too deep into conversation. When I looked over, I saw him shaking Agent Adams' hand. He made a colorful comment about the weather as they made their way inside. His offhanded remark got a slight chuckle out of my partner. He walked over and introduced himself as Sheriff Russell Giles Jr. When I asked what I should call him, he said, "Everyone calls me Russ." We chatted in the lobby for a while longer. This was due to us having to wait for his deputies to secure John Henry before he could be moved into the interrogation room. The sheriff offered to take us to see the Ward Edwards Museum later that day. Now, in his words, it was the world's largest outdoor museum, a claim which cannot be refuted since we failed to take him up on his offer. He also gave us a few pointers regarding places to eat. Apparently, the China Wok restaurant was all the rave, and Miss Betty's fried chicken was one of a kind, especially the fries. He also told us more about the courthouse. "Everyone visits the courthouse," the clerk threw in, which got a nod and chuckle out of the sheriff. I told him we tried the local coffee shop, but it wasn't open. The clerk laughed and said, "It's never open." "Why's that?" I inquired. "Oh, their boy's sick," he answered. That's nonsense, Ernie. Now stop putting bad rumors on honest folk. Ain't nothing wrong with their boy." "Sorry, boss," he meekly replied. Chapter 3. Interregnum. 2 deputies ushered John Henry into the interrogation room with us. His handcuffs were chained to the restraining bar on the table. They left his shackles on, along with the spit mask which concealed the lower half of his face. The sheriff thanked his terrified deputies and told them they could wait outside the room. Before we could begin, I informed the sheriff that I'd need his mask removed, otherwise it would hamper our communication. He agreed, but warned me that this was for our own good. I browsed over the suspect's file while waiting for him to undo the straps. The process took much longer than usual. When he did finally finish, I thanked the sheriff and then addressed Mr. Henry. "Greetings. I'm Special Agent Harris and this is my partner, Special Agent Adams." He said nothing. Instead, he stared into my eyes with a vacant expression. Seeing that I wasn't about to back down, he finally spoke. His voice was heavy and steady. It matched his burly lumberjack frame. "Your first name?" "Michelle. Anything else?" "There's always more." "Oh, really? Like what?" "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted, when he is drawn away of his own lust, and enticed." "What are you getting at?" I asked. "Be careful of the company you keep." "Why's that, Mr. Henry?" "Let me pray for you." Beg your pardon? You were in the serpent's den, he said as his eyes wandered over to my partner, Agent Adams. Then he added, I know an evil spirit when I see one. Sure, you can pray for me. What? No, Agent Adams blurted. Why not? It'll make him feel more comfortable. Besides, maybe he's right. Maybe I am in the serpent's den, I told my partner with a keen eye. You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. Agent Adams got up from the table in disgust. He flailed his arms around and said, What the hell? Where's my frickin' vape pen? Every time I try to quit, somebody does something stupid to tick me off. Just try to ignore him, I told Mr. Henry. With pleasure. He nodded before bowing his head and beginning his prayer. Father God, keep Michelle safe during these tumultuous times. Her faith will be tested, but only through you will she find the peace and salvation she so desperately seeks. Better to be blind and of faith than see and be ignorant of faith. Those serpents who walk amongst you, do not be fooled by their slithering lies. Walk with the word of God. Let his divine word carry you in stride to the gates of the promised land. Let the light of commandment and judgment overcome the darkness and wickedness that surrounds you. That was quite an interesting prayer, Mr. Henry. Good. I was afraid I may be getting rusty. Once a man of the cloth, always a man of the cloth. I'm sure your flock misses you. I'm sure they do. Now, what do you really want? He asked with a suspicious eye. I'm glad you asked. Before we can formally begin the interrogation, I must state for the record to any individual suspected, detained, or, in your case, arrested and charged with a crime, that we do not use recorders due to the classified nature and sensitivity of our work. We rely solely on pen and paper to assess the merits of each case under review. How we choose to classify yours will determine what course of action is taken in any future criminal litigation against you. Now, the Department of Paranormal Investigation is an autonomous division within DHS. We fall under the Protocol 7 initiative, which was signed into existence by a secret executive order 1300P7 under the American Governmental Observation and Assistance Program. Even though we're part of DHS, we are not subject to any DHS laws or operational procedures due to this initiative. Anything said by you or anyone else in this room is considered classified and cannot leave this room. You do not have the right to an attorney. Anything you say will be used to properly classify your case. You may end the interview at any time, but we reserve the right to proceed with the investigation using emergency countermeasures. The violation of UDHR is part of NWGO Action Code 11, a World Order Agreement, and a separate arrangement, the Treaty of Concord, which is signed by the acting President of the United States every year. This treaty allows us to void the civil rights of any citizen, non-citizen, or unidentified entity upon U.S. soil. Now, if you are indeed contacted by the devil, we'll get to the bottom of it. As a DPI agent, I'll do my utmost to see that it is done and that your case is classified properly. We hope that you will fully cooperate with our investigation. It's in your best interest to do so and will help expedite our decision. The information I just shared with you was a mandatory reading of the Treaties on Discourse and Disclosure. This is a diplomatic ex parte that denies legal counsel to anyone we investigate. Do you understand, Mr. Henry? I'm not quite sure I do. Agent Adams blew a large cloud of mist into his face after taking a hit from his vape pen. I'll tell you what it all means. It means you have the right to remain silent, but it will be held against you. What agency is this again? DPI, he grumbled gruffly. And you've seen this before? What do you think? Wouldn't have asked if I knew. I quickly chimed in. Don't worry, Mr. Henry. We're the good guys. You have nothing to fear. Just tell us the truth about what happened. If your story checks out, you'll be free and clear. You have my word. The sheriff gave him a pat on the back before telling him, See, told you I'd bring in some folks who could help with this. And I kept my word. Now don't worry, John, you'll be cleared of this mess in no time. Let's not get too hasty. Not until we finish our investigation, I told him. I might not look it, but old Henry here wouldn't hurt a fly. He's been a solid pillar of our community for as long as I've been buck hunting. I put on my reading glasses. A few things in his file stood out. Not wanting to start questioning him yet, I made some more small talk. I wanted to gauge his temperament, so I said, You know, my dad used to be a pastor. Used to? That's right, used to. Did he lose faith? Something like that. Very unfortunate. His first name's also John, I mentioned before turning my attention to the crime scene photos. I had to admit they were stomach-turning. I placed a finger to his arrest photo and said, John Lucas Henry, age 47, of African-American descent. 2 kids, Mo and Lauren Henry. Husband of Suzette Henry. Pastor of the Second Flint River Missionary Baptist Church. Veteran, farmer, coal miner, railroad worker, faith healer. Not one person in town has a bad thing to say about you. Sheriff Giles butted in. He's a good man, I tell you. Ain't no way he did this. I wonder now. How did a good man wind up murdering his entire family? He stared silently into my eyes for a moment before speaking. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown to hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Agent Adams let out a very audible groan. He'd been standing in the corner, vaping away up until that point. After Mr. Henry had quoted yet another Bible verse, he began to impatiently pace back and forth, checking his wristwatch periodically. When I looked over at him to see if he had anything to add, he gave me an annoyed expression, the one he always gave when he wasn't getting his way. Then he turned his attention to Mr. Henry and grunted. Looks like we're not going anywhere for a while. Should I grab a Snickers while we're at it, huh, Mr. Henry? He simply shrugged and said, Do as you will, evildoer. Isn't that grand? Pot just called the kettle black, Agent Adams muttered. Don't mind him. He's always this fussy, I informed Mr. Henry and the sheriff. The sheriff seemed surprised by Agent Adams' conduct. After computing it in his head for a while, he had what he thought was an aha moment. He thought we were using the tried and true good cop, bad cop routine. I let him believe it. Even though I knew our tactics weren't a ruse, it was better this way. Knowing that Agent Adams was always this indecorous would have made the investigation that much harder. So with that in mind, I began reading from the report, adding a decorous touch as I did so, to really drive home my role as the good cop. Oh, you seem like a good guy. But these crimes, I don't know. It says here you savagely murdered your wife and children with a sledgehammer. That true? I mean, I'm sure a big strong guy like you had no problem swinging that thing around like a broomstick. Mr. Henry growled but said nothing. He just stared at me as if I had no clue. Agent Adams chuckled. He did what? You didn't read the report? Oh, I only glanced over it. Did he really kill his family with a sledgehammer? That's what the report says. Agent Adams stopped pacing and vaping long enough to glance over at Mr. Henry. He just shook his head and smiled derisively at him. Mr. Henry, you're the demonic version of the legendary John Henry. And this was how the interview pretty much went, with me trying to pry valuable information out of the suspect while my partner did nothing but make snide remarks. His antics aside, the gist of what I was able to gather from this story went a little something like this. John Lucas Henry was born in 1972 in Savannah, Georgia. As the youngest of 7, their family grew up impoverished by all metrics, or what he likes to call, and I quote, poorer than a poor man's rainy day. He did share a few stories about his childhood, but claims not to remember much about his formative years. He didn't speak too highly of his late father, but loved his mother dearly. He shone with pride when he told me that she was still hanging around in the swamps of the living, as he called it. His fondest memories from childhood stemmed from helping the local church. He recalled going there almost every day to help keep God's temple pristine. Later, when he was a fair bit older, he told me that his fondness for Bible study and about the first time he got to lead the opening prayer for Thursday evening church service. His parents worked as sharecroppers all the way up until the practice was phased out of Georgia sometime in the mid to late 50s. He smiled when recalling the day his family packed up everything they owned and threw it in the back of the rusty old beat-up Forester green truck his dad had owned for as long as he could remember, the sun shining. They wanted better for their children, traded in a hard life of sharecropping for a one-room shack in the bucolic town of Mork when he was a young boy. He's an avid hunter and fisherman and misses doing both with his 4 brothers. The only trouble prior to this incident came when he was 16. He got caught by the sheriff illegally scrapping metal and junk parts to help put food on the table. He told me this is why he enlisted in the army, so he could help feed his family. He joined when he was 17, served with honor and distinction for 4 years, before returning home to Georgia to help bury his father, who died after a long battle with lung cancer. He spent time as a drifter, coal miner, and railroad worker. He settled back in Mork when he was 29, married his childhood sweetheart, and rebuilt the same old church he grew up attending. The place is a glorified shack, and his ministry and faith healing bring in enough to carve out a modest living. The only noteworthy thing to come out of the interview happened at the end when I asked him, "Why did you do it? Why did you take a hammer to your loved ones?" He replied with, "The devil made me." Mr. Henry never denied killing his family, just that it wasn't his fault. He swore up and down that he loved them and would never hurt them. He was thoroughly convinced that it was the voice inside his head that had compelled him to commit his vile deeds. Agent Adams got a good snicker out of his assertion and repeated, "The devil made me do it," loud and grand enough to get under everyone's skin. And that was pretty much it. I thanked the sheriff for his hospitality and Mr. Henry for giving me the information I needed to finish my report. The drive back to our hotel wasn't too bad. We did stop to pick up some Chinese from the eatery the sheriff had mentioned. My partner was livid for most of the ride. He cursed the resource department for assigning us to a bogus case and claimed that they were amateurs. I held my opinion in reserve. The last thing I wanted to do was listen to him double down on his crude remarks with even cruder ones. We stopped at the local shop to pick up supplies. Adams's foul mood changed for the better almost as soon as we walked in. He immediately gravitated towards the sweets and grabbed a pack of candy cigarettes. "Wow, I haven't seen these since I was a kid." His comment intrigued me. I asked him to elaborate, and he told me. "Jacob and Rosalind would get me these all the time. Every time we go fishing, we'd stop by the general store, grab some bait, and ask Jacob to buy me a box of these. Man, they're the exact same ones. Oh, I have to buy some." He expressed this a bit exasperatedly and was stupefied by the delightful coincidence. I never heard someone refer to their real parents by their first names. When I asked, he confirmed that they were indeed his biological parents. I wasn't surprised by my question. I wanted to dig deeper, but the moment had already passed. All it took was for the clerk to politely mention that they didn't carry any vaping products for him to be back to his glum old self. When we left the store, he offered to drive the rest of the way. He told me he needed something to do to keep his mind off the thought of nicotine. I didn't mind. In fact, I gave him a few words of encouragement along with the keys. I told him that he did right by not giving in to his vice and jokingly suggested that the candy cigarettes could act as a temporary replacement if he closed his eyes and tried hard enough. He scoffed at my attempt at humor, but thanked me half-heartedly for the words in the same scoff. Then he grumbled obscenities to himself about the summer heat and how unfair it was that he'd have to dip into his vaping reserves. I tried to review my notes during the car ride, but his singing was awful. He kept asking if I enjoyed this or that song, and I kept saying no. When he asked if I liked the wallflowers, I told him they stunk, which nearly drove him off the ledge, which I found moderately amusing. Much more amusing than his dreadful singing. When we made it back to our hotel, just before getting out of the vehicle, he coldly looked over at me and said, "Look, Michelle, I know you. Just hear me out. You don't have to say anything, okay? Look, you think there's more to the case, but there isn't. You're not going to find anything if you dig deeper. What I need from you right now is for you to go to your room and enjoy your Chinese. Listen to some good music while you finish your report and pack. You're for sure going to classify this as a non-paranormal event and forward your findings over to the gullible sheriff so we can hop on the next plane out of here, first thing in the morning. Got it?" Well, shouldn't we at least get our field coordinator to sign off on my report? You know, before we hand the case over all willy-nilly. Willy-nilly. He chuckled and groaned incredulously before saying, "Just do it, Michelle. I'll deal with him when we get back." I told him I'd consider it, and if he didn't like my response, I was more than happy to forward over my notes so he could share in the task. He of course declined and quickly changed the subject. As soon as I made it to my room, I jumped into my work. After reviewing all the evidence, I concluded that John Henry's case was indeed a severe case of dissociative identity disorder. It's once called multiple personality disorder, but we don't use this name anymore, given its negative and distorted connotation. What I concluded was that a part of Mr. Henry was completely unaware of what the other part was doing. This was suspected from the beginning, but it wasn't made evident to me until the interview. I say this because Mr. Henry demonstrated traits typical of the disorder, such as dissociation and deep depersonalization, barely spoke or responded to questioning. When he did, his remarks were often unfitting. His bizarre unsocialization may have spawned shortly before or after murdering his entire family. And this is atypical, but can be triggered during one of the 3 phases of psychosis. In my opinion, Mr. Henry should be transferred to a mental facility for proper treatment. His inability to control his behavior in certain mental states, combined with his difficulty understanding that what he thinks and feels affects how he behaves and acts, is extremely concerning, making him, in my professional opinion, an extreme danger to the public at large. I took a deep sigh after finishing my report. Not because I was relieved that it was over, but because I didn't receive that usual sense of fulfillment I got whenever wrapping up a case. The thought lingered in my head as I ate what was now cold cuisine. Something wasn't right, and whenever I had a gut feeling that was this strong, I was never wrong. I closed my laptop and asked myself, what am I missing? Come on, Michelle, think. I knew it wasn't a case of possession because this wasn't how possession worked. I found this out when my sister passed away. Possession is a very haphazard affair that needs an object, which in turn works as a conduit between the possessor, spirit, and the possessed, person. In my sister's case, it was an antique mirror from the Victorian era that did the trick. I ran my fingers through my hair in frustration. The televangelist on the TV screen caught my attention with his evangelizing. The image drove me crazy. What were my instincts trying to tell me? Come on, think, Michelle, think. This isn't right and you know it. That's when it hit me. As I sat there, twirling cold noodles with my fork, pondering something Mr. Henry said. I didn't think it was anything of note at the time, but when he talked about the voice in his head, he claimed it was, and I quote, "That tricky old serpent loves to play, disguising his voice as a woman's so I wouldn't think it was him. Once a trickster, always a trickster." Now this innocuous detail almost went right over my head. The memory and moment when it all clicked still haunts me to this day. Because if I had have caught it sooner, maybe the case would have had a different outcome. Sadly, it all makes sense now. Okay, what am I talking about? Now, I want you to picture the devil. Whatever you're thinking is probably wrong. Forget the banal images of a jester, jokester, or horned demon. Even my partner knows much about him. He always has a bead or two on the occult. I think he's met just about all the heavy hitters except for him. He wasn't the type you wanted to meet. The last thing he'd do is be the voice inside your head. He simply wasn't the type to play charades. He preferred to get his hands dirty, but alas, his story is one for another day. I called Agent Adams and asked him to hear me out. I said this because I already knew he wasn't expecting to hear from me until tomorrow. He reluctantly agreed, and I reluctantly shared my theory. When I told him everything I mentioned prior, he agreed that it was odd. And then, to my surprise, he mumbled a few expletives before insisting that he had to make a few phone calls. He refused to explain anything further and said that he'd call me back. I paced up and down my cramped room while waiting for his return call. Even though I'd never do it, I could see why he vaped. Times like this really wreaked havoc on my nerves. I'd say about 15 minutes later, he was at my door, banging on it like a madman. He was still putting on his suit jacket when I opened it. He didn't even wait. He just blurted out that we had to leave. When I asked where, he said back to the jailhouse. Chapter 4. Rose. During the car ride, my partner didn't say much. He was speeding like a bat out of hell through the town. Luckily, our hotel wasn't unreasonably far from the jailhouse. When we made it, he pulled in front of the building, threw the vehicle into park, and rushed out. He banged on the front door like a crazy person, trying his best to get the attention of the deputy on duty for the night shift. The poor deputy was seated behind the counter with his feet up, sound asleep. The deputy was so startled by the commotion, he nearly fell out of his chair. He jumped to his feet and hurried over to the door. As soon as it was unlocked, Agent Adams barged in and demanded to be taken to John Henry's cell. The young deputy protested and insisted he'd have to okay our request through the sheriff. My partner was in a foul mood. He stared coldly at the young guy and told him something very chilling. He said, "Look, kid, I know you're just doing your job, but if I were you, I'd listen to me. I'd listen before things got out of hand. A place like this doesn't stand a chance against the things I know." What does that mean? "If you value your life and the life of your sheriff, you'll take us to see Mr. Henry. No, I won't ask again. I'll turn my back and let what happens happen. When it does, I won't lose a wink of sleep over it." "Okay, follow me," he said with a slight tremble. We followed the deputy through the sally port and down the corridor that led to the jail cells. Mr. Henry was in the last one, all the way down at the end. When we reached it, the deputy stopped to catch his breath. "Give me the keys," Agent Adams demanded. "Are you mad? I could lose my... Life or job? Which one, kid?" "What are you talking about?" "Give me the keys and wait outside. When your precious sheriff gets here, tell him what I said." "Okay. You guys don't need help?" "Whatever you do, don't come back." "God dang it. You want me to tell Sheriff Giles to wait outside of his own jailhouse? Why don't I tell him to piss in the wind while we're at it? I know he don't look it, but he's got a mess of a temper." "You know what agency we work for?" "Something to do with the paranormal, right?" "Good guess." "He possessed or something." Look, I can't guarantee that Mr. Henry will survive. Still, my suggestion is the best and only chance we have at minimizing casualties is this. Now, I don't care what you tell him. If you come back, you will die. Simple as that, kid. The deputy nodded, his head solemnly. He turned and slowly trotted down the hall while babbling to himself about how much of a pickle he was in. My partner heard him and mumbled a few invectives in private retaliation. He glanced over at me then, and then to Mr. Henry. Relief washed over his senses. It wasn't too late. Our suspect was indeed still alive. Mr. Henry rose from his bed and made his way over to us. There was a glint in his eye as he approached. Well, so the demon and the angel return. Whom do I owe the pleasure? If you've come to find salvation, then forgive me. All I can offer you is damnation, Mr. Henry said with a strange grin. He stared at us with a look that was as cold as the stone wall behind him. A shiver went down my spine. The only thing that separated us from this monster was a set of steel bars. Agent Adams handed me the keys and said, "Unlock it." "Are you sure?" I asked with a great deal of reservation. "We don't have much time." "It's your call," I said before jamming the key into the lock. And then I muttered, "You know I hate it when you leave me in the dark like this." He checked his watch before saying, "Oh, damn it, we're too late." The tricky smirk on John Henry's face made me hesitate. I just knew he was going to pounce on me the moment I turned that key. I stole a deep breath, placed a hand on my service weapon and stopped. Something out of the corner of my eye seized my attention. There was a shadow at the end of the hall. First, I didn't think it was real. I watched with bated breath as the figment of my imagination became real. The anticipation sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to draw my weapon, but my partner's calmness was infectious. A woman a few inches shorter than me casually walked over. Her knee-length crimson jacket matched her lipstick and hair. She was wearing a pair of leather pants, boots, a white blouse, and a loosely strung black corset. What stuck out even more than her flowing auburn hair was her eyes. Her right eye was green and her left glowed red, piercing through the oppressive dimness of the night. Her expression was cold. A lack of verve or vim in her pale skin gave her face a pallor that made her look somewhere in between living and non-living. I could tell by the way she moved that she wasn't like anyone else I'd ever encountered. Stiff and mechanical, yet graceful and elegant. My first thought was vampire, but I was familiar with how subtle they moved. She seemed like something else altogether. Something about her made me feel uneasy and queasy. The nauseousness was strong enough to snap me out of my stupor. I drew my weapon and ordered her to identify herself. When I did this, she stopped her leisurely stroll and stared at me with a look of intrigue. I looked over at my partner. Instead of reaching for his weapon, he reached for his vape pen. The disgruntled look on his face told me that he knew her. Instead of saying something that would have been useful, he just shook his head and murmured, "Ah, you finally crawled out of that hellhole. I was wondering when you'd return. Shame, I was just starting to enjoy a life free of headache." She laughed and said, "Long time no see." "Not long enough." "How'd you guess it was me?" "I didn't. You can thank my partner." "Oh, you have a new partner?" "Yeah, not CIA anymore." "Oh, do tell." I formed a new agency, Department of Paranormal Investigation, and before you ask, the answer is no. My codename isn't Black Squid. That's all over. "I'll miss the good old days," she said with a reminiscent smirk. "You were the only one able to handle the squid suit, am I right?" "Yeah, that's right." "You're one of a kind." "Well, the feeling is mutual." "Oh, I feel honored." "Well, you shouldn't." "What? Why not?" she asked before stealing another step towards us. I warned her against taking another one with a stark reminder that I wouldn't hesitate to shoot. My partner stepped in front of me and calmly said, Put the gun away, rookie. What the hell is going on? She's not here for us. Yeah, we can't just let her... We're not gonna let her do anything. She'd kill both of us before you could squeeze that trigger. I don't know about you, but I'm not finished living. There has to be something we can do. Yeah, there is. We can finish our investigation in one piece. Our job is not to intervene in the affairs of the supernatural, or in her case, the dispossessed, he coldly reminded me. Seeing how displeased I was by his pacifism, he took a hit from his vape pen and then took a step back. Oh, that's your move, rookie. I don't know. Sometimes we gotta learn the hard way. Else get the gunk out of the ears when the mind gets all bogged down by sanctimony. I glared at Adams, then at her. There was no way I was going to let her pass without doing anything to try and stop her. Hey, stay right where you are. Take another step and I won't hesitate to use lethal force. She smirked and told Agent Adams, "Don't worry, I'll go easy on her. I like her, she has potential. Oh, but don't think you don't owe me for this." "I'll see what I can do," he grumbled rather begrudgingly before deciding to throw in a thanks for good measure. He walked over to Mr. Henry's cell, looked over at the poor guy and said, "You're a very unlucky man. Wish I could say I was holding an ace up my sleeve. A good hand just wasn't in the cards for you. So, would any of you like to know why I did it? Why I became the voice of pandemonium in his head? This is the part where I explain my plan after all." "Keep it to yourself. You haven't changed. Neither of you." "Well, I'd like to hear the details," I said. Finally, someone who understands theater. Now be amazed, brave protagonist. Stand aside as I needlessly waste time poring over the details. Oh, and I promise you a gut-wrenching story, or you get your guts back. It was indeed I, the director, who beguiled our beloved thespian into slaughtering his entire family in the most theatrical way imaginable. That's right, old Henry. It was I. Does my voice seem vaguely familiar? I hope so. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed making you squirm in your own head," she said with a look of relish in her dead eyes. Mr. Henry began shaking the bars and screaming like a wild man. The rage and realization had finally simmered, and he cried out in righteous anger. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." She vanished into the valley of shadows, making me second-guess everything I thought I knew. My haze of confusion didn't last long. Her footsteps were close, eerily close. No, it wasn't my imagination. She was standing right behind me. I froze when she leaned into my ear and whispered, "Simply slaughtering him isn't enough. I want to see the sorrow bloom in his eyes." She placed her hand on my shoulder after sharing her sick secret. Her touch was chilling, so much so I wheeled around and aimed my weapon at her. Who are you?" I demanded to know. She looked over at my partner and smiled grimly. What an inquisitive agent she is. I see the government has been busy recruiting the brightest minds. "Answer my question," I shouted. She ignored me, allowing her gaze to roam over to John Henry. He was in a blind rage by now, shaking the bars and growling like an enraged brown bear. For a minute there, with how burly he was, I thought he was going to break free, but he was human after all. "It's okay, Mr. Henry. Stay calm. I'm going to get you out of there," I cried out. "I told you I was a man of God. I told you I would never hurt my family. I loved them with everything I had, and you devil, you took them away from me. God, I call upon your holy word. Strike down the serpent," he cried out in a fit of pain and panic. She raised her arms and twirled around in a way that showed off her figure and finesse. Well, What do you think? Am I to die for or what? Hopefully I left enough to the imagination. I always try to keep up appearances for my victims, she said with an untamed viciousness. Her words stabbed through him with such force. Again he called out to the Lord God. Oh, Almighty Father, that old serpent, the enemy of man and angel, draws near. The traitor himself dwells among us in the flesh. Let your word be my shield. Safeguard me from the defiler, for I am not afraid. He who does not show fear in the face of terror shall not be terrorized. I shall not walk in the valley of fear, but faith. Begone, devil. Crawl back to the pits of despair where you belong. He hollered out, as if he could cast her away with his booming voice. Stay away from him, I shouted. She stopped twirling and peered over at me. You still haven't figured it out? Figured what out? Try to shoot me. What? But go on. I insist. I tried to squeeze the trigger, but it wouldn't budge. I racked the side and tried to fire again, but instead of hearing that distinct click from my Generation 5 Glock 19, there was silence. I checked to see if my gun was out of battery, but saw nothing unusual. I even tried to reset the trigger, but the same thing happened. My look of vexation amused her. She blew a kiss and said, I disabled it when I was behind you, whispering sweet nothings into your ear. She wagged her index finger and continued. I broke the safety firing pin with one tap of the finger. It's right in the middle of the slide where the barrel and firing pin come together and go boom. She shook her head in pity at my pitiful display of silence before turning her attention back to John Henry. She hopped right up to the bars and exclaimed, Did you miss me? I certainly missed you. She smiled sinisterly before swaying away effortlessly when he lunged at her. His big old hand was so close but so far away. It was like a bear paw compared to her head. No matter how hard he swung or how much he struggled, he couldn't find his mark. She looked over at my partner then and said, She really didn't see it, huh? Oh, what makes it so sad is... She leaned her head to the side without looking, avoiding Mr. Henry's angry swipe with ease. Wow, and here I caught myself moving slow enough so she could see me disable her gun. It seems our protagonist is a little slow on the draw. God, you're a real pun factory, Agent Adams grumbled. You saw my gambit, I assume. Yeah, I saw it all right. I don't know about her, Gary. I prefer your old Eagle Squad back when you were CIA to this newfangled supernatural bunch. Cut her some slack. I barely saw what you did. I'm getting old, Rose. I'm not as sharp as I used to be when we used to tangle, Agent Adams mentioned. Oh, what a shame. Should have taken me up on my offer. Talent such as yours shouldn't go to waste. Agent Adams shrugged before coolly taking another hit from his vape pen. Yeah, immortality's overrated. Says the grumpy old man. She smiled. You did this, eh? Agent Adams asked. What do you mean? She inquired while trying to play coy. The act wasn't very convincing, but she carried on with her hack performance. I didn't ask for this. I'm a victim here too, you know. To be forced to feed on blood, stalking poor sods day and night. An outcast destined to watch the world wilt around me. Do you know what it's like? If I were a brave fool, I'd plunge a stake into my own undead heart and put to death this miserable, never-ending existence. She paused for a second to make sure we were looking. Her innocent little act transformed into one of darkness, exposing her true desire to a crescendo of angry catcalls that erupted from her not-so-amused victim's prison cell. I wonder what it would feel like. Would it be unsteady and ignoble, or steady and noble? I'd hope for the latter, but embrace the former. Perhaps I'd feel something for the first time in a very long time. Perhaps I am a poet, contrary to what my critics think. Oh, you're far from a poet, Agent Adams said. Oh, What would you consider me then? A sadist, he replied. What should we do? I asked. Let her have her fun. She'll get what's coming to her. People like her always do. I resentfully holstered my useless service weapon and watched in utter defeat as she began to toy with Mr. Henry like a cat toying with a mouse. He was howling, mad, and as angry as a raging bull. His prison jumpsuit was drenched in sweat. I could feel his frustration mount with every failed attempt to strike her. With a crazed growl, he reached through the bars, grabbed her by the jacket collar, tried his damnedest to smash her face into the steel bars. She stopped herself from hitting them with such strength and ease. It was undeniable who was in control here. Her face wasn't even an inch removed from the cold steel. With a look of longing in her eyes, she told him, "Was it hard not having me around? It's hard for me. I thought about you all the time. I never wanted to let go, but I had to. It was the only way. I have a confession to make. I wanted your crimes to fester on your mind, for your soul to languish in that dark, dry pit of hopelessness that once overflowed with hope. I wanted you to realize that God would never in a million years forgive you." "I'll kill you," he cried out while trying to again, in vain, smash her head into the bars. This time he even reached his other hand through and placed it to the back of her neck for leverage. Her merriment only fueled his disdain. He tried with all his might again and again before finally giving up and punching her in the face. She buckled over and pretended to be hurt. The moment was fleeting, and soon her mirthful wickedness shone through like a black candle in a white arcade. The shame and horror of witnessing her unleash naked cruelty upon an innocent man is hard to live with. If only I would have done something, anything in that pivotal moment, he might still be alive. I know it's not true, but it's a thought I've wrestled with every day since then. The poor man cried out at the top of his lungs. "God is my protection. He warned us about your wicked ways." "We have to do something," I told my partner. We're doing our job, Michelle." "How can you be so calm? An innocent man is..." Before I could finish my statement, I looked over at his cell and couldn't believe my eyes. She was standing inside of it, right behind him. Even he couldn't believe it. He stood there for a moment, frozen in fear. When his mind had finally caught up to reality, he quickly turned around and placed his back to the bars. The shock made his knees buckle and his breathing heavy and uneven. "You still don't get it, do you?" Who are you?" "I'm the one who was in your head whispering those awful things this whole time. Wasn't the devil. Little old me, the Revenant." "What? Oh God, save me." "You have a strong mind. It took a bit longer than usual for you to let go." "Dear God, no. She nodded slowly and said, "Now you're starting to see. I'm not surprised a person with a skull as thick as yours took so long to figure it out. Well, I almost gave up, but oh my efforts have borne fruit." "You were the voice in my head?" "Yes," she grinned wildly. You tricked me." "Yep, it was me the whole time." Chapter 5. Rose continued. He looked over at us and cried out for help. I had to turn away. He was a strong, proud man who had taken care of himself and those around him all his life. A man who had done nothing but give back to his community. Now here he was, begging for help like a feeble old man. The only reason I was alive was because of her mercy. I knew if I tried anything, she wouldn't hesitate to go back on her promise to Agent Adams. And what use would I be to humanity dead? What good would I be to my sister's memory if I followed her to an early grave? The feeling, it was like a sucker punch to the ribcage. Even with all these thoughts clanging around in my head, my first mind was to think of a way to save him. I grabbed the keys off the floor and jammed the first one into the lock. Damn it, it didn't work, I blurted while fiddling with the keyring. God, why? Why have you forsaken me? I have done nothing but serve you and your son faithfully. I have done nothing but be a grateful man in an ungrateful world, he cried out in a fit of grief. Rose placed her hand on his chest and, with a gentle push, induced his heart into an irregular rhythm. She took a step back and watched the chaos that bloomed from her grim garden. Mr. Henry's eyes bulged like a wild animal ensnared by a hunting snare. She grabbed him by the wrist and yanked his arm towards her. Just one whiff of the blood that flowed through his veins was enough to make her dizzy from shameless pleasure. Please, he wheezed through clenched teeth. She ignored his whimpers, chortling ever so softly as she said, I prefer the wrist to the neck. The blood tastes sweeter this way. Let him go, I shouted, while trying yet another key. It's okay, Mr. Henry. I'm going to get you out of there, I promise. Was it cruel of me to take everything away from you? Your family, your sanity, your faith. Feels like I'm cradling your life in my arms right now. I can't wait to feast on this lovely stew of misery. He hissed in agony. Oh, I wish it wasn't over. God, please, save it. The look of malice in her eyes penetrated his soul almost as deep as her fangs penetrated his flesh. It was absolutely a feeding frenzy. She let go of all inhibitions and drained away like a leech stealing the vim and verve from an imprisoned angel. She let go of his arm and he crumbled to his knees. He stared up at her, tears slipping from his broken gaze. There were no last words. There was no last-minute miracle. He closed his eyes and took his final breath. I shuffled through the keys on the keyring. There it was. God, what I hoped was the master key. I shoved it into the lock and the door popped open. Without even thinking, I rushed over and checked for a pulse. There was nothing. His hand was stiff and ice cold. The only thing left of this proud man was a crumpled pile of flesh and bones. She stepped past him as if his life meant nothing. I could see her making her way over to my partner, Agent Adams. He saw it too, and before speaking released a cloud of mist after taking a sizable hit from his vape pen. My. I see you haven't lost your neck for abject cruelty. Once a monster, always a monster. Really? Was I that insufferable? He frowned and said, You should go. Is that any way to treat a friend? You're no friend of mine. What about our history? What about it? You used to be one hell of a weapon. Agent Adams didn't say another word. He just stood there glaring at her, waiting for her to get the hint that he wasn't interested in reliving the past. My hands were trembling as I brought them together to say a short prayer for Mr. Henry. The anger inside me made my stomach turn. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed some answers. I had to know who this lunatic was and why she had done the unthinkable. When I approached her, she ignored my question. Instead, she reached inside the sleeve of her crimson coat and retrieved a rose, offering it to me. I don't want it. Take it or else. Or else what? I'll make you. I'm not taking it. As you wish. You're sick. My sense of justice was amusing to her. She stared longingly into my eyes without saying another word. My existence, I bet it was fuel for her sick imagination. Her bitterness touched my soul like a septic dream. For some reason, I started to feel sleepy. The drowsiness hit me like an avalanche of emotions. My eyelids felt heavy, and a feeling of ease washed over me. The world around me was a serene palace void of fear or reproach. My arms tingled, my legs numb. My mind lost its vehemence and thirst for clarity. I could feel myself slipping. Slowly but surely, I knew I'd never want to escape this palace of golden dreams. The more I resisted, the more appealing its hypnotic hymn. I was so tired of being afraid. Everything I ever wanted was right here at my fingertips. Hey, you all right, rookie? What? Hey, snap out of it. Where'd she go? She did another one of her disappearing numbers. My eyes are old, couldn't keep up. All I know is you took the rose and then she was gone. I looked down and saw the rose I'd never asked for or remembered taking, clutched firmly in my hands. I looked over at Agent Adams in shock. I wanted to scream, but the thought of how foolish I'd look lamenting in front of him made me scream on the inside. My sister, the promise I'd made to her right before she died. I couldn't falter, I just couldn't. I had to remain strong. You okay, rookie? Yeah, what happened? You've been standing there staring off into yonder for a while now. For a moment there I thought you were... Oh, that's right. What? What's wrong? Well, she mesmerized you. She did what? Mesmerized you. Form of hypnosis. We only thought demon laws could do it, but I guess revenants possess that ability too. Oh, damn it. What's wrong? I have to update my report to reflect these new developments in the case. Back to your old self, I see. Good. That's real good, rookie. I'm glad you're okay. Why wouldn't I be? Hey, it's not like in the movies, you know. When demon laws mesmerize you, you go insane. But I guess revenants aren't as strong, which makes sense. Demon lords? You know, the fallen generals. We call them demons or whatnot. Your mind must still be a bit jolted. It's okay, rookie. I got your back. I know a few mental exercises that'll jog your memory. Thanks. No problem, rookie. Why do you keep calling me that? What? Rookie? Yeah. Oh, think about it. Huh? We're not superheroes, Michelle. We're not here to save the day. Yeah, I know it's ugly business, but since when did our job become pretty? This isn't the movies, kid. Hell, even if it were, we're not the protagonists. We're the people willing to get our hands dirty if it'll save our country. I know. I just wish there was something we could have done to save Mr. Henry. I mean, I get it, our job is to investigate and report our findings. I know the information we provided is crucial to taking our country back before the end times, but still, I'm human. It's hard to see someone in need and not doing anything. Now, this is only your fourth case. Wait until you get a few more notches under your belt. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. He told me, which I found to be rather ominous. Looking back on it, he was right. The more I've seen, the more I've come to question my decision to pursue a career at DPI. I could go on and on about my moral dilemma, but that's not what this is about. His next statement threw me for a loop. For a second there, I thought he was purposely trying to pour cold water on my dreams of a better tomorrow. You have a background in psychology. You of all people should know we have to keep the psychological separate from the logical. He looked down at Mr. Henry's drained husk of a corpse as if his ordeal was a cautionary tale. We're only guests. It's not our job to get involved. Right now, information is our greatest weapon. We take what we learn and use it to secure a spot for humanity in the war between good and evil. Are you really on our side? I've been fighting to keep our nation free since before you were born. I'm 26. If you've been doing this for that long, you're pretty old. Story for another day. I smirked. Oddly enough, an expression as simple as this was cathartic. Well, I look forward to hearing that story, considering you never talk about your past. It's not as complicated as you think. What now? I asked. He looked over at me with a crooked smile and said, Good, it worked. Jogged your memory. You should still probably see the in-house shrink, but as far as mental faculties go, you should be as good as new. What do you do? Nothing much. Nothing much at all, rookie. Whatever you say. Come on, let's go see the sheriff. Good news is he was right. Mr. Henry was a decent man. Bad news is no one will ever know. Sounds like a plan. It looks like you could use a bite to eat. Don't look so frazzled. Nice bowl of chili will do the trick. Getting mesmerized takes a lot out of you. You been mesmerized before? Yeah, nearly killed me. Well, what happened? Maybe I'll tell you about it later. Too hungry to think straight right now. I shook my head and said nothing more. I simply followed him as we made our way through the sally ports. The whole time I remember thinking how oddly predictable Agent Adams was and how oddly unpredictable everything else was. Which makes me wonder why the agency paired us together to begin with. Working with him had been a crazy crash course in the political machinations of the supernatural, one which I cannot say I was totally prepared for. And that was it. We stuck around with the sheriff and a few curious locals until the county coroner arrived. Adams and I answered their questions as best we could, but it was difficult since we weren't allowed to say much, given the classified nature of our work. It's always sad having to hold back vital details, but the last thing we wanted was to start a panic. We were out of there before I knew it, just like Agent Adams said we would. When we returned to HQ, the first thing I did was bury myself deep in DPI archives. I had to know more about these revenants. It was difficult to put the pieces together with what little intel we had. Apparently, revenants are a more recent phenomenon, the new kid on the block, so to speak. It all starts with their leader, a young boyar born to vampiric nobility in Romania. The Dracul demonic order, to be exact, which is the oldest and most prestigious bloodline. He was already a prodigy by the age of 7. His fighting ability was so profound it drew the attention of the master of all vampires, the devil himself. He took him into his custody as an apprentice, making him the first and only person to ever be given this honor. Some say that he was conditioning him to be the next Antichrist. This is highly unlikely given the nature of the devil, and the arcane and ritualistic methods used by the Church of the New Faith when choosing an acceptable candidate. To say the devil was hard on him during his training would be an understatement. For 6 years he suffered a taste of the torment his master had endured in the pits of hell after he'd been cast from the heavens. The boy was able to hone his skill under the devil's tutelage, becoming something of a legend. In arguably his greatest moment, he was able to battle a high-ranking archangel to a draw at the age of 14. The records are scattered, but apparently vampire aristocrats are no different than their human counterparts when it comes to scheming and court intrigue. His talent had become a thing of envy and worry. How long will this go on? He was only 16 and already he'd been given the title of warden. He'd risen through the ranks faster than anyone thought possible and was still climbing. Allowing this young upstart to continue his rise was an unimaginable affront to their own proudful aspirations within the Transylvanian court. A cadre of influential nobles came together in secrecy and conspired against him. They agreed to forge documents that would implicate him in a plan to overthrow the Wolf King. Their plan was comically bad, and everyone saw right through it. To everyone's surprise, the devil played along. No one knows why, and I will not add to the speculation with my own misplaced conjecture. He told the boy that the only way he would let him walk out of Bran Castle alive was if he defeated him in ritual combat. Details surrounding the fight are scarce. The only thing I know for sure is that he was soundly defeated. As strong as he'd become, he was no match for the devil. He was quickly brought to heel and punished in the cruelest way imaginable. When I say cruel, I mean surprisingly twisted, even for the devil and his notorious standard of cruelty. As I explained earlier, forget what you thought you knew about him. He's God's greatest adversary for a reason. He's far from a court jester or a wounded dog waiting to be put out of its misery. He's the harbinger of evil, the manifestation of everything that God is against. If I were you, I'd pray that you never have to find out what I mean. For he is truly the embodiment of wickedness, darkness, and ungodly determination. Somehow the boy survived his punishment and lived on, becoming the very first of his kind. We do not know his birth name, but he's called Lord Bale, or First Revenant. Based on what we do know, he's one of the most powerful beings in existence. So dangerous, in fact, that there's an executive directive specifically on him and 2 others called Cerberus. The 3 are to be handled with extreme caution and considered to be the greatest threat to the world as we know it. The other 2 are the devil, for obvious reasons, and a woman by the name of Charlotte Baranov. Her story is a remarkable one. She works for our OSS department, but again, another story for another day. I already knew about the other 2 and why they're so dangerous. I asked around headquarters about Lord Bale and the rumours regarding him, and they're all over the place. Allegedly, his ability to travel back in time is what makes him one of the 3 demigods, which is what these 3 targets in Executive Directive Cerberus are called. When I asked my partner about this, he scoffed, but didn't dismiss it outright as gossip, like he usually does when I bring up subjects from around the water cooler. Revenants are classified as a unique subcategory of vampires in our database. To my knowledge, this Lord Bale created 4 vassals. The 2 known ones are Bethel Rosemary and Terence Walker. His motives and reasons for choosing them are unknown. The only thing that is clear is that whoever he chooses must prove themselves worthy before he offers them further insight. Well, there's more, but sadly I must end my findings pertaining to the Revenant phenomenon here. The last thing I want to do is overshadow the life and legacy of John Lucas Henry. He was a proud man who believed wholeheartedly in the Word of God. I hope the few snippets I was able to provide into his remarkable life are enough to leave a sort of literary memorial. To no one's surprise, the case was deemed low priority and closed almost as fast as it opened. I understand that the agency has limited resources, but that still doesn't change the fact that every life is precious. Even though I have an eminent amount of respect for my partner, Agent Adams, my greatest fear is becoming cold like him. I often wonder if his behavior comes naturally, or if it was all the years of work in the supernatural field that caused his coldness. Well, this concludes my report. File number 184, John Lucas Henry. My CIR regarding this case, along with my CRF, will be transferred over to the Resource Department. Sadly, what remains of Mr. Henry will forever rest in the DPI digital catacombs. No dossier number was assigned to this report. The subject was deemed too insufficient a threat to national security to be given one. Special Agent Michelle Harris. Badge number 9578823. July 4th, 2023. Okay, so the end of the story is where I get to freestyle, and just waffle on a bit and indulge myself. And you're all very kind to indulge me in all this kind of nonsense I speak. But I really just want to say thank you very much to everybody who responded to the end of the last video. Yeah, I lost somebody, not, as I said, not a very close friend, but somebody I'd known for 30 years or so. And she was always the life and soul of the party. You know, one of these people that embraced life, loved it. And yeah, she was taken away way too early. Such is life. And that's one of the things I tried to stress at the end of the last video. Just go out there, talk to your friends, anybody you haven't seen for a while, loved ones, people, just anyone that you knew who might appreciate you, you know, checking in on them. Do it now, do it before it's too late, because these years roll by and one day it will be too late and you'll just think, well, damn, all I could have done was say, hey, how you doing? Acknowledge that you are there in my life, that kind of thing. Yeah, so thanks everybody. I did appreciate that a lot. I'll be back again tomorrow evening with something else. That's all I can say. Till then, my dear friends, you'll sleep well and, you know, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.